You can't define IDW Publishing's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series in just one way. It's so expansive and covers so much ground. It's an action-adventure serial. It's a family drama. It's a science fiction thriller. It's weird. It's a young adult book disguised as a monthly comic. It's a love letter to decades of TMNT lore in comics, television, movies, and video games. It's a masterclass in comic book storytelling in both the short and long term. It's an explosion of often beautiful work from a variety of different artists. It's become, in many ways, the pinnacle of TMNT storytelling, not just because of its lengthy duration of over 100 issues and counting, but its undoubtable quality. And it all starts here, with issues 1 through 12, published between late 2011 and mid-2012. This is a comic book transmission. Who and what are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Chances are if you're watching this you already know. But let's brush up on the basics. Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo. 4 anthropomorphic turtles trained in martial arts by an anthropomorphic rat, who then proceed to defend New York City against extraordinary threats of all kinds. Most notably an evil ninja clan known as the Foot, and their leader, the Shredder. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, TMNT for short, were created in a black and white comic book published in 1984 by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. This bizarre yet charming concept exploded into a pop cultural phenomenon after it was adapted into a widely successful cartoon show in 1987. Ever since then, the Turtles have been everywhere. This was especially true in the late 80s and early 90s. There were toys, video games, feature films, everything. Everything. If you can slap a turtle on it, it's been made and distributed to the masses. So why have the Turtles endured for so long? There are a lot of reasons. But if you look at the best TMNT stories, regardless of the medium, you notice a recurring theme. Family. The Turtles and Splinter make up a weird, misfit family. They're 4 brothers, who are different from one another, but in the end they come together to fight evil and do what's right. In a way, it's beautiful. Look, I said it was beautiful, not Shakespeare, alright? Either way, it is a lot of fun. In 2009, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles brand was purchased by Nickelodeon. There was a new animated series, followed by more toys, video games, There was also a brand new licensed comic book from IDW Publishing. That's where we come in. Attached to it initially were author Tom Waltz, artist Dan Duncan, and colorist Rhonda Pattison. Also brought in was TMNT co-creator and man who allegedly bought a tank in the 80s, Kevin Eastman, who contributed to the writing, art, and design work. Right off the bat, that gave the series some all-too-valuable geek cred for the Ninja Turtle diehards. So in August 2011, IDW Publishing's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 was published with 4 different variant covers, each featuring a different turtle. And off to the races we went. Almost right off the bat, TMNT #1 hits us with what may still be the best 2-page spread in the entire series. Certainly it's one of them. We've got the Turtles leaping into action against a group of thugs led by Old Hob, a new villain created for the series. Put aside that this is beautifully drawn and colored. This image gives us the series' initial hook using purely the visual language of comic books. If you know next to anything about the Ninja Turtles, you know there are 4 Ninja Turtles, not 3. That means somebody's missing, which means something is wrong. Even if you don't know anything about the Turtles, it works. Look at how Old Hob's gang is grouped compared to how the Turtles and Splinter are grouped. There's a sizable gap between our heroes, whereas the villains are drawn fairly tight. Then, consider Dan Duncan's masterful rendering of the Turtles, I appreciate Michelangelo's toothy growl in particular, and Rhonda Pattison's beautiful smoky coloring of the scene, and you've got pure comic book awesomeness spread out over 2 pages. Incidentally, the Turtles all have red headbands because that's how they were in the original comic book, and this series has a ton of respect for the source material. Still, it was confusing then, and it's confusing now. Thankfully, it only lasts a few issues. Indeed, Raphael is missing. This was the big twist early on. Having Raph isolated from his family, struggling to survive on his own. He basically becomes a teenage mutant hobo turtle. How did it happen? In virtually all versions of the TMNT origin story, the Turtles and Splinter are mutated once they come into contact with a glowing radioactive ooze. But in the IDW verse, another animal is mixed in with them. A cat! Who swoops in and plucks Raph away from the others. The cat goes on to mutate into none other than Old Hob. As far as hooks and setups are concerned, this is a pretty good one. Raph has almost always been written as emotional and hot-headed. He's the one most likely to clash with his brothers. Having to scrape by on his own early on essentially gives him a reason to be that way, as opposed to simply assigning him those character traits for no real reason. So in the larger sense, this is a good idea. Here's the problem. Spoiler alert, the 4 Turtles are eventually reunited. And yet this separation period for Raph is never effectively followed up on. Between issues 4 and 5, Raph quickly goes from reunited to reacclimated. It's true, Raph. You're really picking this up fast. You've come a long way in just 1 month of training with us.
Thanks, guys. It's weird, like my body already knows what to do, you know?
There's no story about Raph butting heads with Splinter or his brothers as he struggles to adjust to this life and family. Not to mention the friggin' ninja training. It's the kind of missed opportunity the series would not come to be associated with in the decade that followed. Let's call it stumbling out of the gate. Still, at least the Turtles look good. Better than good, actually. These 12 issues are among my favorite artistic runs on any Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book. Nobody draws the Turtles quite like Dan Duncan. It's all in the way he does their faces. The big wide eyes, the way the beak curves up, the larger than you might expect size of the teeth. Even their bodies have a seemingly perfect turtle-to-human ratio. Drawn in his sketchy, yet masterfully inked style, it all adds up to figures that are very expressive. His turtles act as well, if not better, than any I've ever seen. As do virtually all his mutant characters. Colorist Rhonda Pattison's contributions to the series should never be ignored either. She's still with the book to this day, and has provided a really nice consistency throughout the series. Issue number 5 is a particularly strong one for her, as she uses 3 different color palettes to convey 3 different settings and moods. We have a smoky-looking city scene as a stealthy Splinter sneaks around buildings at night. Then we have a more sunny and colorful palette as we check in with our reunited brothers in their sewer home. Finally, we switch back to a more sepia-toned look as we travel back to feudal Japan to see the Turtles and Splinter in human form. That's right, I said the Turtles and Splinter in human form. IDW made a bold choice in going with a reincarnation angle for their version of the TMNT story. We see in issue 5 that Hamato Yoshi and his 4 young sons were brought back in their animal states after they were executed centuries ago by Yoshi's enemy Oroku Saki, the future Shredder. Obviously nothing like this had been done with the origin story before. I'm not sure if any purists were angered by it, but for me it's a case of no harm, no foul. It doesn't fundamentally alter anything about the Turtles, Splinter, or Shredder. They didn't change the origin story so much as add a few new layers to it. That's one of the things this series at large does, especially with these 12 issues. Like a cover of a classic song, we see most of these characters are familiar notes played with a new and different sound. It's just a matter of what the IDW sound will be. You've got the Turtles, Splinter, April O'Neil, Casey Jones, Shredder and the Foot Clan, Krang and Dimension X, Baxter Stockman, etc. We get familiar story beats too. We've got Stockman's Mouser robots invading the Turtles' lair, the boys having to rescue a kidnapped Splinter, April and Casey's budding romance, among others. It all feels familiar but fresh. The IDW crew gives April O'Neil a larger role in the formation of the Turtles' identities. She's an intern at StockGen, owned by the cunning genius Baxter Stockman, who forms a bond with the rat and 4 turtles brought in for research and experimentation with the radioactive ooze that mutates them. She even gives them their names. I have History of Renaissance Art 101 this semester. This creates a nice connection between the turtles and April early on, to the point that she's essentially part of their family from the start. Casey Jones, New York City's resident hockey mask-wearing vigilante, is not so much the jacked-up meathead we've seen before. He's actually kind of a scrawny kid who Raph saves from getting beat up by his drunk, abusive father. Whether you dig this approach largely depends on what you look for in your Casey Jones. I won't lie, part of me does miss the meathead, but it certainly gives the character more depth, and sets up stories for them to tell as the series progresses. Naturally, that's a big part of what they're trying to do with these 12 issues. They're essentially a garden filled with seeds for stories that would come to fruition in the over 100 issues that have since followed. The care and crafting put into these early issues was evident when they came out, and is even more so with the benefit of hindsight. To that end, I appreciate that these first 12 issues give the Turtles a more expansive gallery of villains to fight. Shredder and the Foot Clan are here, of course, including Shredder's granddaughter, Karai. The book does right by Shredder, casting him as a quietly menacing monster who doesn't go into battle until things become serious. The blood-red cape is a nice touch too. But from a villain's standpoint, Shredder is the easy route to take. He's the big one, the archenemy. He is to the Turtles what the Joker is to Batman. Who else do the Turtles have to fight? Well, there's Krang, who in the 80s cartoon was an evil alien from Dimension X who teamed with Shredder to conquer the Earth. Thankfully, they don't go the pointy-headed man in a red Speedo route with his robot body here. No, this Krang gives off Space Nazi meets tank vibes. Hey, he could have been bought by Kevin Eastman. It certainly makes him more foreboding than funny. I won't lie though, when I read Krang's dialogue, I can't help but hear it in that crazy voice Pat Fraley did in the cartoon.
Shredder, you bungling idiot! I should have known better than to listen to you!
Baxter Stockman is a character that's been around since the early days of the comic book. The guy we meet in the IDW-verse is as slick, as ingenious, and as cunning as ever, despite being subservient to Krang. But the Baxter Stockman character might be best known for turning into a fly on the old 80s cartoon show. Yeah, remember that fly guy we used to fight in the video games? That was him. So naturally, when he showed up in issue number 1, I figured he'd be a fly in no time. But it's been 10 years and this nerd still hasn't mutated into a fly! I still don't know if I should be impressed or disappointed. Old Hob feels like a standard run-of-the-mill henchman, ultimately serving Krang and Baxter Stockman. But his role surprisingly grows and changes as the series rolls on. It's an interesting thing to look back on. There's also Alopex, another new character created for the series. I often refer to her as the book's mildly sexualized mutant snow fox. She's introduced as part of the Foot, and we really just have time to meet her here. But she'll stick around. Like Hob, her role evolves as the issues go on. Getting back to the idea of the best TMNT stories being about family, it's not surprising to see that theme is extremely prevalent in these issues. Not just the discovery of one's family in Raphael's case, but what they mean in the formation of your identity. The Turtles learn a lot here in terms of their own personal history, and who they are as individuals, and they learn that by being with each other through the good times and the bad. There's also the family you choose for yourself. April unknowingly plays a role in the Turtles' story, but eventually she comes to embrace and accept that role. Casey leaves an abusive father to find our heroes as his new surrogate family, most notably a surrogate brother in Raphael. There is no stronger bond than family, regardless of what form it takes. Not really a lesson you'd expect to learn from 4 turtles and a rat, but it makes for a heck of a foundation for a comic book series that thus far has lasted almost a decade. Heck, if you think about it, this series could have been called Family Matters.